Hi, everyone. I'm Stan Mallow. Welcome to Paranormal Yacker. Today's show is part 2 of my 3-part interview with Ella LeBain, author of the book series Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo. Book 5 details the history of U.S. presidents' viewpoints on UFOs and disclosure. Which president or presidents were most open to the existence of UFOs and ETs? And did any of them ever have an encounter themselves?
That's a great question. Ronald Reagan, he was fascinated by UFOs, and he did see a UFO flying in a plane, and he talked about it. He had so much enthusiasm about it, and he was a believer. He was a very spiritual man, and he knew that something was going on. So the Star Wars program, which is nicknamed the SDI Strategic Defense Initiative, is nicknamed the Star Wars program. That is no coincidence. And that all happened under President Ronald Reagan. I also know that Colin Powell was put as an editor of every single one of Ronald Reagan's speeches. It was his job to edit out all the words and verbiage that he put in there about UFOs and aliens and contact and all the stuff that he really wanted to talk about. And he was such a charismatic speaker. A lot of times he spoke off the cuff and off script. And that's why we have quotes of him speaking to the United Nations about saying, well, what if there was a real alien threat? Wouldn't we all come together and put aside our petty differences and become one human race against this alien threat? And that was spoken a couple of times. Jimmy Carter also had experiences, and he made some efforts to try to get disclosure, but so much of it was blacked out, redacted, and he had a lot of pushback. President Donald Trump really was the disclosure president, because disclosure, the official disclosure, the stuff that's been coming out of our government, happened during his tenure in office. So December of 2017 was a coordinated event with the media to start it. And then, of course, it's just been like a rolling stone of information that has been coming down the pike. Most recently was these 1,500 pages that prove the biological effects that people have when they come in contact with alien ships, technology, as well as alien beings themselves, proving that there has been a lot of harm, skin problems, burns, missing pregnancies. A lot of us who have experienced stuff like that, even memory loss, I mean, you name it, 1,500 pages of medical stuff, they've released it. So it validates, it vindicates all of us who have had these types of experiences, that we're not crazy when we talk about it. It's been a great time to be alive, to see this happen, and to be vindicated in this way. But these are all part of the signs of the end times, which has to do with the age of knowledge. And that's another part of the prophecy where it says knowledge will increase in the end times. So we are living in the age of knowledge.
Included in your book is a compilation of quotes by U.S. astronauts who describe their experiences with UFOs in space. Could you share some of those quotes and tell me how those UFO experiences affected the lives of the astronauts who encountered them?
Let me just say off the cuff, I was able to talk to and chat with and have sort of an informal interview with Al Worden, the late, great Al Worden, who was in the commander module, went to the moon. And he and I had some things in common because he was fascinated by Zecharia Sitchin. And I, as you know, in my book, I share that I studied under Zecharia Sitchin. He was an influence on my work. And I got to discuss this with Al Worden in 2019. He's passed now, and he had a great personality. He was always very up and cheerful. But here's the thing with the astronauts, especially the Apollo, they all had NDAs. They were all had non-disclosure agreements. That meant that they were not allowed to speak about what they saw, what they heard, any of their experiences in space regarding aliens or UFOs. And yet he had this way about him, because the media was always asking him, did you see anybody on the moon? They would say, where are the aliens? And he would say, well, every morning I wake up and I look in the mirror and I see there's the alien. It's me. He would turn it around on them. And that was his way of avoiding the question. I'm not avoiding your question, but I am bringing him up because in his discourse with me, and this was at an informal cocktail party because I worked at Space Fest for one season, and he was like my neighbor. He had his author table near mine, and I was like the elephant in the living room because I'm selling these books and doing my spiel about disclosure, and here I'm surrounded by these astronauts that are not allowed to talk about it. So when I got to talk to him in an informal setting, he started to, like, as a human being, as humans do, they start to talk, and you get to hear what they're saying and what they're not saying, and you can read between the lines. And he basically, and I published this in book 5, said that in many ways we're the alien, okay, which has a lot of depth in terms of, like, do we really belong here? Who's really in charge of this planet? Who were these Anunnaki beings that Sitchin wrote about? And he had a lot of knowledge about that. And so that's Al Worden. In terms of what happened to the Apollo 11 astronauts, it almost makes me cry sometimes because I know that Neil Armstrong probably went through one of the hardest things that a human being can go through. And that is to be the one who actually saw the aliens and encounter these ships on the moon. And I published the picture of William Tompkins' sketch because he had this photograph. Remember, he was in the control room because there were 2 feeds that came from the moon, one for the public and one that was private that just went to mission control, and he was in there. And one of the reasons that Neil Armstrong had to take control over the module, they weren't able to land where they were supposed to land in the Sea of Tranquility, is because they were greeted by this fleet of spaceships. And William Tompkins saw this on the live feed and he drew it. He was a lifelong aerospace engineer for NASA, and he's passed now, but he left behind a legacy of disclosure as a whistleblower. And that was one of the things. So Neil Armstrong saw this and he wasn't able to talk about it. The same thing with all of them that have seen these things, they can't discuss it. And it's created a lot of problems. Michael Collins, I got to meet him too, and he's now passed, and he talked about it. In fact, on his Facebook page, he was always throwing messaging like, oh, how would you feel if you found out that we weren't alone? He always went into that conversation about the aliens without actually owning it and saying, I saw this and I saw that, to get around his NDA. The same thing with Buzz Aldrin, who is still alive. He said a lot of things off the cuff. I mean, I would encourage people to read so they get it verbatim. They all have had stuff to say about it. Edgar Mitchell, he was probably one of the biggest astronaut whistleblowers there was, and he didn't really care about his NDA. And he said it right out. We are not alone. We are not alone in this universe. There is other life here with us. And he went to the moon too. I take what they say seriously because I believe that, first of all, they're human. They're part of us. And as a human being, they want people to know. But because of their legal agreements, they were restricted in speaking so candidly. It's still out there.
A secret space program has been operating for over 70 years to prepare us for the real Star Wars. Can you expand on this secret space program and tell me what have they been doing to prepare us for the events that are to come?
Well, that's a great question, Stan. I would say what they've been doing to prepare us is they've been putting it in movie scripts and television shows. And I believe this idea and this decision began in the 1950s with Majestic 12, when these 12 admiral generals from the Navy that were put in charge of anything to do with UFOs or sightings or aliens or contact, and they wanted to make sure that they controlled this information. They knew, based on testings that they did, like the War of the Worlds, that people were going to just panic, and they didn't want that to happen. They knew that they needed to prepare people, and this was the best way to do it, was through the culture of television and movies. So Star Trek was a huge soft disclosure project, and I proved in my book that Gene Roddenberry actually had a relationship with 2 of the admirals that were on MJ-12, that he was being given information to use in a science fiction series. I also proved, like I do these talks, The Truth is Stranger Than Fiction, when I are live at conferences, and I have all these PowerPoints proving not only this, but also that back in the 60s, the technologies, there's about 68 different technologies that they were promoting in Star Trek that we now have, that are part of our existence, our daily lives, and I list them all, and then some. So we're seeing spaceships around the sun that look like the USS Enterprise and even the Millennial Falcon. fashion. So Star Wars was another huge piece that came in the 70s, which, I also write about Judaism versus Judaism and where did they get these concepts from. It's too coincidental that ancient Israel, which is different than modern Israel, but they were rooted in these concepts that were promoted through Judaism in Star Wars. If you read the Old Testament, the ancient Israelis were a vast army. Well, today's modern Israel is also now a vast army, which Ezekiel 37 was a prophecy of this coming true, where the Lord said, I'm going to put flesh on these bones, I'm going to breathe life into these bones, and these bones are going to live again, and they're going to be a great army. And that is today's IDF. And they worship technology there. They are at the cutting edge of most technologies and space technologies, as well as everything else. And I don't see that as being coincidental. So Star Trek and Star Wars are top for preparation. But then again, so were all these other TV shows, My Favorite Martian and Mork and Mindy. And most recently, we have Resident Alien, which is funny and witty and so deeply profound because it's about contact and alien abduction and contact with aliens. And one thing that all these alien TV shows seem to have a common denominator, and that is how these aliens can integrate with humans, how these aliens can become like humans. And the truth is stranger than fiction. I do not think that these are accidents. They're certainly not coincidences because there's so much truth in them. So whether these script writers are prophetic in who they are, or they're being fed information, or they're just doing really good research, like Chris Carter in the X-Files. There's so much in the X-Files that actually really did happen. Even Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that was a documentary. We can't deny that. I mean, I can go on and on about TV shows and stuff like that and the reason for it, Stan, is so that when people see the reality, then they have something to relate to. And they go, oh, wow, just like Star Trek. Like lately, I've been posting on my Facebook, Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo page, that was a video that was taken from the ISS. Now, the ISS, International Space Station, is home to 11 different space agencies. NASA does not control it. Now, NASA, the American Space Agency, might have protocols and their rules about this and that, and they can't release this, which I write about in book 5 about how they cover stuff up with different types of technologies. They have a 10-second delay on some of the live feed, but they can't control what someone in the Italian or the Spanish or the European Space Agency does. So there's a video going around, it's on my page, which shows this huge, gigantic ship on the horizon of the Earth, and he zooms in with his cell phone, and it looks like the Klingon warship. So if you go to my page and you see this stuff, and people make these comments because it's exactly what they can relate to. Wow, it looks like the Klingon warship. So where do they get that from? From Star Trek. So this is all part of preparation because people have been immersed in these cultural movie, TV, and it's like they're living it now. We're living it. It's happening. So I think that's one big piece that they've been doing. I think that the cover-up has also been somewhat relevant because of national security. They don't want people to panic and they want to keep status quo. But at the same time, I also believe that the government themselves doesn't even have a handle on it all. And part of the cover-up is to cover up the fact that they're not in control. They want to project power. They want to project like they're in charge. And this is so intimidating to them as well, evidenced by the fact that people in the government, in these different factions, have spoken and they've been whistleblowers to say that this is overwhelming, that when they see these aliens and they work with them, they're so big, they're so ugly, people just lose their mud. There was a story with Nixon where he took Jackie Gleason to go see an alien. And Jackie Gleason, he's this big jolly guy who's a foodie, he loves food. And his wife said after he saw that he couldn't eat for a month because he was so flabbergasted and intimidated that he saw a gray. I think that the government has been covering it up for multiple reasons, and some of it is to protect people from freaking out. So they put it in the movies, and the Klingons represent the reptilian because that's what the reptilians look like. Similarly, where they have these scaled faces, biped, they're like lizard men, and they're big and they're muscular and they're kind of intimidating and overwhelming. And on one hand, we have to understand what happened without just, the government is bad and resenting the government. On one hand, they're trying to protect everyone and themselves. And then on the other hand, they're building this fleet behind the scenes so that and they know the prophecies are out there. They know who's coming. They know what's coming. They know where Nibiru is. They've been tracking it for decades. And I proved this in terms of the historical research about Nibiru and how it wasn't covered up in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then when Sitchin came out with his book series, The Earth Chronicles, especially the 12th Planet, and he had this public interview with the chief NASA astronomer, Robert S. Harrington, and they compared notes. And Robert S. Harrington, they were tracking Nibiru, and Sitchin comes from the historical, and they compared notes, and they like connected. It's out there. You can look it up on YouTube, and they both agreed. And then what happened within that year, right after the interview, not even, Harrington comes down with this, at the age of 50, some unusual esophageal cancer and died. And they told Sitchin, and this is when I met Sitchin after this. And so that's why he was very sort of nervous about answering any questions about when. Like he was told he can go forward with his research, but he cannot give dates. And they didn't want him speaking about when. That says a lot in and of itself. I'm not going to date set because the calendars are so messed up. So it really depends on which calendar you're looking at. The Jewish calendar is probably one of the most astronomically accurate ones that we have to date because they didn't stop their calendar when the Gregorian calendar changed theirs after the death of Christ. The Gregorian calendar, the one that we all live on today, is June 24th, and it could be a whole completely different day in the other calendars. So I would say, suffice to say, it's definitely happening in this century, probably sooner than by the time we end the century. We're only 22 years into it. And here's another piece that I'll add about precessional ages. So you know how it's a metaphor that I use that is astronomical. So you know how when you get up early in the morning and you watch the sun come up on the horizon and you see dawn, you see the first light of dawn, which usually happens about an hour before sunrise. So metaphorically speaking, that's where we are in terms of where this new age is going to come in. This age, this precessional age of Aquarius, we're still in the dawning, but we're very, very, very close to where the sun actually comes up over the horizon. So that 1 hour can be extrapolated out to 50 years when you're counting precessional ages. So there's a 50-year margin of error in counting precessional ages. So 50 years coming, 50 years transitioning, which basically gives you 100 years altogether. We are in that right now. I also know that 2031, there's an asteroid coming. In the 2040s, between 2040 and 2046, there's a lot of calculation that this system actually does pass the Earth. I could be wrong, but that calculation that I published in my 5th book, so people could do their own research and compare their own notes. I'm not hanging my hat on that. And then there's another factor that we also have to factor in, and that is the fact that they've been time traveled. So when they time travel, they go back, and it's all out there that they have the ability to time travel. That's another truth that is stranger than fiction that we watch all the time, and it's actually has happened. And so if they've time traveled and they've gone back in time to adjust certain things, then who's to say that today is what we really think it is? We may be farther away, we may be closer than we think. Who knows? Only God knows. And this is why we just have to live our life every day, trusting and making sure that our relationship is right with our Creator, because one day we're here and the next day we're not. And that could happen to anyone for any reason, whether it's natural disasters or deaths just come suddenly, and there is life after death, and we just have to focus on that and focus on the fact that all this is changing and we're all part of it.
Should viewers of Paranormal Yacker want to buy The Heavens and End Times Guide to ETs, Aliens, Exoplanets, and Space Controversies, Book 5 of Who's Who in the Cosmic Zoo, or any of your other books, how can they do that?
They can go to who's who in the cosmiczoo.com and purchase through me, and they get free shipping anywhere in the United States, plus an autographed copy, or Amazon. I'm in all the Amazon channels, international, Canada, as well as Europe and Australia, and here in America. So they could just look me up on Amazon.
Ella Lebain, I thank you for being my guest on Paranormal Yacker. It was great talking with you. I wish you continued success in everything you do.
Thank you so much, Stan. It was wonderful talking to you too.
Hi, everyone. This is Stan Mallow, the Paranormal Yacker. I hope you enjoyed part 2 of my interview with Ella LeBain. In part 3, she'll talk about the sun's dark twin, the Nemesis Nibiru system, a celestial army that will battle to save this planet from dark forces. She also provides evidence that proves the end times are near and explains how we can prepare our souls for the fate of Earth. To be sure you don't miss part 3 of my interview with Ella or any of my other upcoming interviews, be sure to subscribe to my free YouTube channel. All you have to do is press the subscribe button on your screen.